Hey y'all, got another one for you. 4L60E on the bench. We're going to tear it down and inspect it, see what's up with it. This was a little bit different and interesting rather in many respects. This came to me from my fabricator. It's actually his wife's vehicle. It's out of a 2001 Chevy truck that's set up as a kind of a desert pre-runner. And so truck came off the road back in 2018. The engine had some sort of malfunction problem, failed in some way. And you know how it is with leisure vehicles. If life gets in the way or other things take priority, it gets put on the back burner for a good long while. So they've decided to kind of bring it back to the forefront so they can enjoy it, get it out to the trails again, and take it out to the desert. And so he brought me the transmission because he wanted me to have a look-see at it and make sure that everything was okay. His chief concerns were, because it was been sitting so long, dry rotted seals, O-rings, and parts otherwise just simply degrading due to disuse. So this transmission was rebuilt by the previous owner of the truck by a shop in Phoenix, and my customer was told that it was built to handle 1,000 horsepower. Okay, so that's what really makes it interesting to me, because it's debatable, at least in my opinion, as to whether you can build any 700R4 4L60E to handle that much power for any appreciable length of time. So we're going to have a look at it. I expect to see a multitude of upgrades in here. Everything from billet shafts to hubs to 5-pinion front and rear planets. I don't want to say radical mechanical hydraulic calibration, but I expect to see upgrades to the valve body, to the pump, things of that nature. So this is a 2003 model year unit. It's in a 2001 truck. That's perfectly fine. As you can see, this appears to have been the rebuild date, and either the initials of the person and or shop, or some sort of other identifying information. But we're going to take it down, see what's up with it. Now, when it was on the road, when the engine was working, the truck was driving, the transmission was functioning normally. So this truck has, I think, a 550 horsepower engine, and he's going to be installing something like a 3,500 RPM stall converter. So I have no idea what converter was used on it last time. Anyway, that's the backstory, so let's get into it. As always, check end play. For something that's going to be seeing that much horsepower, you'd want to see between 10 and 15 thousandths worth of end play. Anything high performance, that's what you'd want to see. This feels like it has more like maybe 30. So that's something we'll correct when we go back together with it. And for what he's going to be doing and the amount of power his engine's going to be putting out, you don't really need a billet input shaft, a billet output shaft, but there are some things that you want to do to the unit that will ensure that it survives in that kind of environment. So we'll talk through those things as we go through the teardown, but for now, we're just going to take it down and see what's up with it. Okay, these bell housing bolts can be ornery. Torx plus 50 for them. Use heat on the case side of the bolt if it doesn't want to come free. And use a 1/2-inch impact. And don't use a 3/8 socket extension, use a 1/2-inch. And I'm using my belly to kind of stabilize the impact. Last thing you want to do is strip out one of these stupid bolts, because it's a bitch getting it out at that point. Okay, these are coming out quite nicely. Not a lot of miles in this transmission at all. So you would expect not to have issues, at least not with the bolts. So overall, fairly clean, just physically, it's not caked with mud or dirt. I just want to get the bell housing out of the way because it takes up so much space on the bench. So 13mm on the pump case bolts. Okay, 2003 was the last year where the pump had a perimeter O-ring. 04 and up, they went with the wedge seal. So the two were not supposed to be compatible, where if you were to install, say, this pump assembly onto an 04 and up case, there's a good chance you'll have leaks. So I'm going to leave the servo in for right now because I want to see what the band clearance is. 8mm on this little bolt here for the speed sensor. One thing I always harp on is replacing electronics, and I don't know if that was done or not. This could be replaced. I mean, here again, if this was built back in 2016 and it's been, you know, out in the desert and in use, then what was new then could still resemble OEM, you know, original right now. So I don't want to pass any judgment on at least the speed sensor. With respect to the rest of the electronics, we will know once we get inside the case, or at least with the pan off, if they were replaced or not. Wiring harness appears to be original. That's what I told the customer when he brought it. So 15mm here. And 1/2 inch on these bolts I recommend. 3/8 impacts tend to struggle, at least in my experience, or maybe I just struggle with them. Maybe that's just something unique to me. But they're usually not too bad to come off. Get your seal there. It's got a Teflon coated bushing, so we'll go back with one of them as well. Okay, these are your bolts for your shift cable bracket. I believe they're Torx 40. And then you have your manual lever position sensor bolts. These are 13mm. And then your selector shaft linkage arm nut, that's 15mm. This is where you would tap in for a pressure gauge if you're wanting to do a line pressure test on the unit. So you just go right in here, 7/16 on that bolt. And then you have exhaust shield bolts here. These are 10mm. Okay, don't neglect to put that shield on. A lot of heat comes through the exhaust pipe right here and will heat up the side of the transmission awful, and you know, by consequence, heat up the rest of the fluid. I mean, it'll be running maybe 25-30 degrees hotter, especially in heavy, intense, high, hard use applications. Okay, I would expect to see a billet shaft here. 1,000 horsepower, you absolutely need it, though the factory shafts are surprisingly stout. You can get, you know, 6, 7, even 800 horsepower out of a factory shaft without having to resort to billet. Okay, we're not going to reuse this wiring harness no matter what. I don't know that it has been replaced. So what I am going to do though is I am going to try and preserve it. So this is the tool I use. It collapses all of these little locking tabs so that you can remove the harness and preserve the tabs, and you know, if you wanted to, reinstall it. I'm not a fan of that. I always replace the electronics, but you know, if you were on a super tight budget, I guess maybe this is important. The tool's only $10. The harness is 55 or 60, so you know, you still come out ahead $45. It's got a big giant pan on. So these are some of the best pans you can buy. I want to say the pan by itself is like $400, maybe more. Okay, these fasteners are 6mm on hex nuts. Okay, you want to be real careful when taking these off. I'm actually going to put them in a separate container because they're pretty clean, they don't need to be washed. know offhand what the torque spec would be on these bolts, but I would imagine they are the same, or if not very similar, to the factory ones. Get a piece of wood under here. This thing wants to flop around on me. Like I said, it was running and driving and working. No concerns about that. So, curious to see what everything looks like once we get this pan off. Okay, so here's what the pan looks like. It's got kind of an integrated gasket. So I'm gonna have to see if they make replacement gaskets for these pans. I've actually never used one of them before, so I don't know. Fluid looks clean. I don't see anything alarming in the pan. It's largely empty. And he did drain the fluid, but he did not have the pan off. So we'll have to see if replacement fasteners and a gasket is available. Not that I need the fasteners, but I'm just curious to see if they offer them. In the event you lose one or something. Okay. It's got a filter. This is a deep pan filter, but it's got a shallow pan filter type appearance, and I mean, it looks brand new. So I'm wondering if he replaced the filter prior to deciding to pull it out. I'll have to ask him, but the filter itself is brand new. Okay, no filter extension tube. That is a little concerning to me because there's nothing holding that filter in place other than just the quasi-interference fit with the filter pickup seal. Alright, this harness is original, so it was not replaced. So basically what he's asking me to do is inspect everything, make sure that everything is okay from a hard part perspective, and then either replace or refresh the transmission from a soft part perspective. So that's kind of the mission with this thing. And like I said, it was working, functioning, no complaints, no issues, doing what it was supposed to do. So this harness is in good shape. It's an original Delphi harness. We have an 03 valve body, but we have technically the incorrect EPC installed. This is a 93 to 02, but it'll work. I mean, it's as far as its electrical and electronic input-output functionality, it's no different than the 03 and up. 03 and up, Bosch makes those, and they are silver in color. Don't have my 10mm socket handy. Pressure switch manifold assembly. Let's see if this is new. Hard to tell. I mean, it's got a little bit of gunk on it, but it may have been replaced. So like I said, once you have this many years pass, you know, parts have also changed in appearance relative to, you know, back in 2015, 2016 when this thing looks like it was built. So the first area where I expect to see some sort of mod is the 1-2 accumulator, a 1,000 horsepower transmission. Okay, so I don't know, I'll be honest, I don't know if Sonic's pinless accumulators were available at this time, but you know, this being factory is interesting. Let's see. And this looks to be purely a factory setup. I mean, the piston itself looks new. Okay, most of the time you'll see a plastic piston in this location, which you would always replace. Don't ever reuse plastic pistons, especially in high horsepower applications. But this looks new to me as far as that piston is concerned. Check the inner bore here for your housing. A lot of the early 4L60Es and the 700R4s, the what we call the large hole 1-2 accumulator housings, because they have a wider diameter pin, they are getting very hard to find, and they're often scratched up, marred up, you know, to the point where they're not usable. You can't recondition them, at least not without some sort of fancy, you know, machine procedures. Say valve body, we'll look at that and see what mods, if any, were done here. I would expect to see, at minimum, the TCC regulator isolator valve converted to an on-off system mechanically. I would also expect to see the 3-2 downshift valve blocked. The actuator feed limit valve, I would expect to see that shimmed with an inner spring inside the main AFL spring. You can block the 3-2 control valve off too inboard. You know, I mean, there's a laundry list of mods that I would want to do in something that's going to be seeing 1,000 horsepower. But like I said, you know, it's one of those he said, she said type of deals. You know, kind of, you're not getting it from the horse's mouth. I mean, this was all done prior to my customer owning this vehicle, so who knows? Maybe the previous owner bought it and somebody told him that the transmission was built to the hilt, but so it's not going to be, you know, an indictment on the shop that built it, because we don't have all the facts. We don't have a good chain of, you know, information, so to speak, where you have first-hand account or an invoice or something like that that indicates this is like a stage 3 or stage 4 build, and, you know, how it was put together, blah, blah, blah. Those 3 8mm headed bolts, they need to go in these locations. They're a little bit longer than the rest of them. Do not put them back anywhere but those 3 positions, which are here, here, and here. If you do, you might lock up the sun shell. Okay, these solenoids look brand new to me, but these 2 are not. This is the 3-2 control, PWM, solenoid A, solenoid B. These are your shift solenoids, and of course your electronic pressure control solenoid. Didn't want to get on the head of the bolt there. Alright, let's see what we got. There's all the check balls. So I would also expect to see the coast clutch flow control check ball deleted. You can do that either independently or in conjunction with the installation of the Sonex 2-3 shift valve. So let's see how many valve or how many check balls we have. 1, 2, and then there's a whole bunch of them down here. 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7 total in the valve body, or on the valve body, I should say. And they may have left out that 6th or 7th check ball, rather. Unfortunately, I should have had this perfectly flat, upright on the bench. So I've recovered 6 check balls. If I see a 7th, then I guess we'll know that it was set up, you know, factory with respect to check ball configuration. Alright, see if we can get the valve body a little bit closer to the camera so you can see what might be going on with it. Alright, let's see. Here is the AFL valve, and flip it around. It doesn't appear that there's a spring inside of this one. Does not appear that there is. Here's your 3-2 downshift valve. You got the spring in here. This spring is what you would use to shim this spring if you're not buying a Transgo or other type of valve body kit that would have an otherwise shimming spring for the AFL valve. We'll look at the spacer plate hole orifice sizes as well, because I'm curious to see what, if anything, was done with them. But that looks factory. So here's going to be your 2-3 shift valve location. From what I can tell, that appears to be a factory valve. That I wouldn't expect the Sonics valve to be in there. Again, we're talking about 2016 when this thing was worked on, and so that valve may not have existed. Most likely it didn't. I don't know when it came out exactly. Maybe you guys do, but I wouldn't expect to see that in this transmission unless somebody had worked on it between when it was last rebuilt and now. All right, cutting in here with an exploded view of the valve body. Figured you guys want to see it all apart and see exactly how it was configured. So for those who are familiar with these transmissions, you recognize that this is a 100% factory valve lineup setup. So nothing has been done to improve or enhance the capabilities of this valve body. So what is always fundamental to do, and probably the most frequently reported problem with 4L60Es, is trouble code P1870 or P0894, or the OBD1 equivalent for the 95s, and that is a worn or heavily wore out torque converter, clutch regulator, isolator valve, and valve bore. So one of the things you want to do is convert this PWM to an on-off for anything up to about 2007 or 2008. At that point in time, GM started to introduce variable valve technology into their engines, so that functionality needs the PWM to be active for it to work and play nice with the variable valve timing stuff. So anything up to that point in time, you'll want to install two 1/8 inch check balls, one in this spring pocket and the other in this one, and that will prevent this entire valve train from being able to move in the bore. You will have successfully converted the PWM to on-off. Okay. For your 3-2 downshift valve, you want to block this off using whatever means you have. Take this spring, okay, and stick it inside of this spring for your actuator feed limit valve, shimming it so you can get more pressure to all of your solenoids, particularly your EPC. So, again, those are two things that at bare minimum you would expect to have been done with a valve body and a transmission designed to take 1,000 horsepower. Okay, the other thing that you want to do, which I don't know that this valve existed back then, I don't think it did, is install the Sonics heavy-duty 2-3 shift valve in place of the factory valve. They have you drill a small hole in the valve body. It will give you the exact location and details, and that will allow you to have more robust hydraulic characteristics when you put the shifter in drive 3. All right, and then for your forward accumulator piston, never install a plastic piston. Always install an aluminum piston if you're going to run the factory style, or if you're going to install the Sonics pinless variety, which is what we're going to do here. So this valve body will get aforementioned Sonics piston, a Sonics HD 2-3 shift valve. Probably going to install a Transgo SK4L60E in here as well to make it easy. So we'll install whatever spring is appropriate for what we're doing with the Servo, which is that superior tech. We'll install Transgo's valve here and test it, make sure it's okay vacuum wise. If not, we'll install the fits-all valve, and either one of those two valves will correct any weakness in terms of sealing integrity in the TCC regulator isolator valve bore. And then lastly, we'll go ahead and block off the 3-2 downshift valve, and I'll use the Transgo spring. They give you a spring to shim the AFL location here for this main spring, and then I'll just keep this aside for something else. You can block inboard the 3-2 control valve as well. You'll have to just put some sort of sleeve or spacer or something between the snout of the 3-2 control solenoid and the front portion of this valve to keep it from moving. All right. And then if you have leaky bore plugs, Sonics makes generally oversized bore plugs for your abuse locations. This is your reverse abuse valve. That's your forward abuse valve. You can install those. And I think they also make abuse valves themselves if you need them. A lot of the stuff that I'm describing here comes in their Sonics HP1 performance packs. I just wanted to cut in here with a 4.5 or 5 minute segment to kind of go over this. Figured you guys want to see the valve body, especially where we're talking about a transmission that was supposedly built to handle 1,000 horsepower. But so far what I'm seeing, this appears to be a largely stock transmission. 8mm here on your reverse hold down plate. Got a Transgo 469 plate installed. So your white stripe gasket's going to be 01 to early 06 or late 05. Gaskets with no coloring on them whatsoever, they're just the pure black ones, are going to be 93 to 2000. 2001 is when they changed the PWM circuitry in the valve body. The valving changed a little bit, so they made a couple tweaks to the plate. I have several videos that kind of cover all that. So let's take a look at these feed orifice sizes. Okay, this is your second gear feed. Looks like it's maybe 80 thousandths. I think that's fourth. Looks to be like 86 to 93 thousandths. This looks like it's maybe 93 thousandths. The band release looks untouched. Okay, and that may be because he has a very large ratio second gear servo. If you have a large ratio second gear servo here, you actually don't want this hole size to be quite as big as this. Okay, this is your 3-2 downshift. That looks largely untouched. Yeah, and I don't see anything that would lead me to believe that this was calibrated for a 1,000 horsepower application. So, I mean, good choice to use this plate. I use it myself all the time. It's a great plate. I mean, if you wanted super smooth shifts, you could just simply run that plate as it is out of the box. Though I would still recommend you drill based on Transgo's shift kit instructions, even if you don't install their shift kit. Alright, this is a factory accumulator spring for the fourth gear, and I mean, at minimum, I would expect this to have a much stiffer spring, but 1,000 horsepower, let's be honest, you're blocking the fourth accumulator off in the case. So we're going to do that with this one. I'm just going to block it off. You know, no sense in keeping it active. He's going to be running, like I said, a 32 or 3500 stall converter. So you're at that kind of you know, stall speed. It's gonna absorb a lot of shift energy, and shifts will be quite soft if you don't calibrate it appropriately. Okay, when you block your fourth accumulator feed, you can leave this check ball out. So this check ball isn't necessary, and whatever you do, don't put anything in here. Leave this bore completely empty if you're going to block off the fourth feed, and you do that right in here in this area here. You can put a check ball in, or you can put a 1/4-inch set screw. I'm a fan of the set screw method because to me it's cleaner, and plus you can undo it for whatever reason if you need to change the transmission out and use it in like a different, less intense application for whatever reason. I mean, I'm not a fan of making, you know, strictly speaking, permanent alterations to anything if I can help it, if I can get away with not doing it. Okay, so looks like this locking tab got broken. No big deal. Like I said, we don't ever reuse electronics. It does take a little bit of skill to work that tool, and because I don't do it often, I guess I don't have the skill, so to speak. 13mm here. So both the input and the output shaft look factory to me. You would want a Sonic Smart Tech drum in here, 1,000 horsepower application or something equivalent, or Cope Racing. I mean, you would have to go balls to the walls with all of your parts. And like I said, it's really debatable, to be honest, as to whether you can really build a 4L60 or 700R4 for that kind of power for any length of time. I know there's you know, high performance transmission shops out there that, you know, they advertise them, you know, they're available, 1,000 horsepower, stage 4, stage 5, whatever they want to call them, but you know, you're living on borrowed time. I mean, 4L80Es making, or in behind engines making 1,000 horsepower are beefed up to the hilt. So, and the 4L80E is, I don't know, 10 times stronger than this for all intent purposes. So again, I don't know who was told what as far as the previous owner and the builder, but so far this does not look like it was set up for anything remotely resembling that kind of power application. The selector shaft don't want to come out. It's nothing new. Alright, you don't want to keep this till the end because you won't have a band to lever against. I mean, the band's getting replaced. Speaking of the band, I'm going to get the camera a little bit closer so that we could take a gander at the band clearance. And you don't want to see any more than about 1/8 to 3/16 of travel or, you know, longitudinal movement of the band along the drum. Alright, so let me get you a little bit closer and we'll take a look-see. So I expect to see a wide band here. I think this is a wide band. Alto red is what I prefer. Alright, let me zoom in. Alright, so hopefully you can see that. And we have what appears to be about 1/4 of an inch or so band clearance. So this this thing would have an otherwise harsh 1/2 shift, and you know, who knows, maybe he took the calibration for the 1/2 shift in the plate into account, but I doubt it. Like I said, I think this thing was built maybe for a performance application, but certainly not for no 1,000 horsepower type deal. Alright, to the extent you can, try to get this stupid band anchor pin out, because otherwise it'll get in your way when you're trying to get the pump out, because the drum and the band will want to kind of come with it and get jammed up. Yeah, looks like it don't want to come out. Alright, well, we'll just have to dislodge the band once the pump's out and do our best to not kind of disturb things. Alright, frost washer. Non-selective. So this pump looks like it has new bushings installed. So that's a good sign. Always, always, always replace your bushings. And if you hadn't heard me say that enough before, assuming you've watched other videos of mine, and assuming you're not sick of hearing it, you know, don't skimp on that stuff. Okay, so pump mods. Would like to see a Sonex or Transgo boost valve, possibly a Transgo PR valve, though again back in 2016, who knows if that stuff existed. This thing kind of has a mind of its own. Alright, so like I said, he has the reman pump, but I'm not sure if we're going to need it or not. I don't know how long he's had that pump in his possession. I think he bought it relatively recently. So if he's able to return it, then he can, because even if we have to remachine both surfaces here, it's only going to cost him like $125 to do that. And typically your reman pumps are $200 or more. So, and this one looks to be in good shape. This rotor guide's in good shape. I mean, it's technically used, but it's in really good shape. So, I wouldn't fault the builder for reusing it. See, impossible to tell if pump vanes are new once they're used. If the pump has 1 mile on it, you're going to see the wear pattern. So if you have 1 mile, could have 1,000,000 miles. Doesn't matter. So we'll put new pump vanes. Let's check the slide. So again, nothing unusual here. Transgo and breakable pump rings would be a great upgrade for something that's going to see high RPM, so we're going to do that here. And then you always want to check your clearances between the rotor, the slide, their surfaces, and the pump body deck surface. So 1 to 2 thou on the slide, 1 to 1.5 thousandths on the rotor. That's the clearance you want to see. Alright, this is going to be requiring machine work. You can't see it now because I didn't take the seal out, but for your drain back, which is right here, you want to drill this out to 5/16. That will ensure that you have, efficient drain back to the sump, and that fluid doesn't pull in behind the seal and potentially blow it out. The rotor and slide appear to be in good shape. You can install billet rotor if you want, though it's not strictly speaking necessary. Even in super high horsepower applications, my converter builder remarks that he occasionally will see them broken when folks bring him pumps to remanufacture. Oops. So, for your stator support, you always want to vacuum test these things. Clean them up first. In other words, put this thing in the jet wash, empty, free of all of its valves, and then go through it. Assemble everything, then do your testing. So Sonex boost valve, Transgo drop-in PR valve, or if the drop-in PR valve doesn't fix an excessively worn condition in the circuit, ream it with the Transgo reamer and install their oversized valve. And that will fix that problem on a permanent basis, or at least on a very long-term basis. Okay, factory valve, spring, and bumper spring, and PR valve. You can visually inspect the valve if you want, but I don't know how much it's going to tell you. I never presume to assess the condition of valving or bore plugs or anything like that simply by physical or visual inspection. I never thought that was a valid method. I mean, not when you have, vacuum testing capabilities available to you. That's my pliers here are flying apart. So I'm going to get all this stuff out of the pump so that I can immediately wash this up. Today is December 9th, so I'm looking to wrap up my work for the year by the end of this week, because once the holiday season starts, the shop's going to be closed from now until that second week of Monday in January. And I don't know, it's the 5th or the 6th, but that's when everybody's going to return back to work. So from Monday, December 16th through I think it's Monday, January 6th, the shop will be closed to all traffic. I mean, it'll just be closed, shut down, because I also need to do my year-end books and, you know, kind of the business side of things when it comes to the shop's accounting and finances. And I use that week between Christmas and New Year's to do all that. So for those of you that have, like, I don't know, a business or accounting finance background, any business, you got to do your closing entries and close out your books for the year. Okay, pump O-ring, talked about this earlier. The 04 and up with the wedge seals. Just want to tidy the bench. All right. Gotta make sure this band is dislodged. It is. Well, sort of. What the hell happened here? Factory band. So Borg-Warner high energy. Like I said, I've been defaulting to using Alto wide red bands for pretty much every 700R4 and 4L60E that I build. I think they're like $32 or $34. And for that price, where a factory band is maybe 25, there's really no reason to use the factory band, because chances are your reverse input drum is going to need some sort of work on the surface. Like, for example, as you can see here, the previous builder used sandpaper, appears to be 400 grit, to recondition the surface, which on a very lightly worn band surface, that's fine. I do it too, especially if I'm doing like a refresh, but any more than that or anything high performance, I replace that drum entirely. So 4 frictions, 4 steels. These look good. No wear. I very rarely see this clutch burnt. So, not common by any stretch of the imagination. At least not all the ones that I've done. That includes 700s and 4L60Es. These over here. So he's going to be over here later today, so we'll show him what we found and, you know, kind of talk him through everything. All right, so as you guys know, you always want to test your input drum, make sure it's not leaking at where the shaft is pressed into the drum. So you're going to have your stator thrust bearing. This thing will take a beating if you set end play too loose. And this actually doesn't feel very good to me. It feels like it's worn out, so I'm probably going to replace it. And then this washer selective, so you want to make sure that you use the appropriate thickness of washer so that you don't have either too loose or not sufficient amount of end play here. And they can be very, very difficult to get out and, you know, get off the drum when they got fluid here when you're taking everything apart. So this is a number 68 washer. I would have put a number 69 in here, given what we saw earlier when I was yanking on the shaft. So let me fill this with some fluid in the pocket, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do our quick test. So just regular Dex 3. You could use Dex 6 in these transmissions if you want. It's not necessary in my opinion. And that includes for high performance. If you are going to use it, I would actually use it in like a heavy towing and hauling situation, more so than true, you know, street strip or full race, just simply because it does withstand heat a little bit better. Some guys will put them in the 700R4s or even the TH350s or 400s, but like I said, you really don't need to. It's up to you though. Alright, so what I'm looking for here is any bubbles at the base of this shaft. In fact, let me get you up a little higher so you can see a little bit better into that area. Alright, now you got a better view. So this is going to be a 2-3 feed. This here is your forward feed. And then over here at the top is your coast clutch feed. When you test the coast clutch, you want to plug the forward feed with a finger so that air doesn't blow out of it. Okay, so if we see bubbles, we need to replace the drum, or you can press the shaft out and put either red Loctite or sealing compound of some sort and press it back in, though I personally haven't done that with anything serious, simply because in my opinion, or in my mind, that repair method hasn't been validated by me firsthand. Not saying it's not valid, I just haven't proven it to myself that it would work. Okay, air pressure 50 to 75 psi is all you need. Okay, so far so good. You got to do this multiple times, because sometimes on the first or second charge you won't see bubbles, but then after the third, fourth, and fifth time you're doing it, you see the bubbles. Okay, so air staying trapped in the circuit. The air you are hearing is coming out of the bleed orifice here. So I would expect to see transgo bleed orifice as well as high rate return springs in the forward and 3/4 return spring assemblies. Again, I don't know if they exist. I actually think they did. In fact, I remember using them back then. So they were on the market at that time. I'm talking about transgo. Okay, this is good. And then now coast clutch. And again, you want to block off the forward feed. Oh, I'm blocking the 3/4 feed. Duh. Okay, so now we have a problem. Look at the bubble. So coast clutch, forward feed. Let's do it again. And you see that? So this drum's no good. This drum's no good. No good. No good. No good. No good. That sucks. So let's assess the 3/4 pack clearance. It's about 50 to 60 thousandths. More importantly, let's assess the clutch pack itself. See what we got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frictions. So no way in hell. No way in hell this was built to handle 1,000 horse. So I would expect to see a minimum of 4L65E clutch in this location. So 4L65E clutch consists of 7 frictions and 6 steels, the 4L65E apply and backing plate set. And those steels are all lindered, meaning it's choline coated. Choline's proprietary to that company, so the term lindered is used to describe the GM steels. Let me put this in that hole in the bench so we could deal with it a little bit more properly. And I don't look like such a fool trying to deal with the snap ring that has thus far made a mockery out of me. Okay, these snap rings are not supposed to be selective, but I have found snap rings of varying thicknesses in this clutch pack over the years. So load release springs are installed. I'll reinstall them here because I'm going to run the clearance down to like 30 thousandths. So normal wear, you know, in a 3/4 pack. Some signs of slippage, but I think the slippage, to be honest, is from a prior, a prior lifetime for this unit, because I also see some prep work done, and that's good. If you're reusing the apply and backing plates, which I honestly don't recommend, especially in a performance application, you want to use much beefier, stouter backing plate and pressure plate. But prepping the clutch surface or clutch bearing surface is always a good thing to do. So, and it looks like these steels were prepped. You see all the what appears to be either sandpaper or maybe a wafer pad or something That's prep work on the steel. So I guess, yeah, good on the builder for doing that, but not good because these should be brand new. They should never be reused in the 3/4 clutch. I mean, if I'm not going to reuse, if I'm not going to replace steels wholesale in these units, I always put a new 3/4 steel module in. That's just good sound practice. You know, you don't want to mess around with that. Stick these over here, stick these over here. This is good, that could be reused, that could be reused. Snap ring. Alright, load release springs, we'll put them aside. And then we'll take out the forward clutch snap ring and see what's up with it. So 29 element heavy duty sprag or factory sprag. I mean, it's heavy duty, I guess, compared to the 24 element design in the early 700 R4s. I don't know of a beefier sprag than that for these units. I mean, if one does exist, I'd love to know about it because I would install it in all my high performance builds. So backing plate looks fine. So this is your sprag rotation. Hold the assembly like this and freewheel it clockwise, and it'll lock counterclockwise, and that's because the even though the clutches are facing to the rear, the sprag is still holding against engine rotation, so that when the forward clutch applies, the sprag will hold and you'll be able to move forward. When that sprag breaks, you have no movement in drive. You'll just be dead in the water. So here's your coast clutch backing plate, your cushion plate for your forward, and then the bottom steel. You can see the wear pattern on the bottom steel. Steels and frictions here look good. Again, if you have, you know, signs of slippage or a smoked forward clutch, then you want to really eyeball the forward piston housing, the forward piston itself. See if it's, you know, cracked or broken. See if on the forward piston housing the lip seal bearing surface is scored up. That would also explain it. And then of course do your drum pressure test to see if there is you know, impairment where the shaft is pressed into the drum to see if it's leaking, because that would also explain a burnt forward clutch. So you see here he has all of the locking tabs for the snap ring engaged. This is perfect. This is exactly how you want to have your snap ring when you go back with it. Alright, we know this drum is no good, so I'm just going to stick it over there for now. Coast clutches. A little bit of heat on the perimeter, so we would expect to see that given what we saw in the pressure test. So quote unquote normal in context, and that's really what counts. You're tearing down a transmission, you want to find direct causes to drivability symptoms if they're reported to you, and you want to look at everything in context. Alright, I'm going to reposition the camera now so you can see into the case. Okay, 90-degree snap ring pliers for the snap ring for your front planet. Let's have a look-see. So bearing, snap ring. Snap ring looks new. Oops, it was a little too aggressive and strong on that toss. Okay, look at your planet. Make sure that the pinions aren't wobbly. Check your vertical play. I mean, you can put feeler gauges. There is a spec. I don't know what it is offhand. Check your journal, check your splines, check your structure for any signs of overheating. I don't see anything like that. Check this captured bearing. Make sure that it feels nice and smooth. It shouldn't be making any kind of noise. It shouldn't feel like there's sand in it or whatever. Don't wash this planet with solvent. Don't put a whole bunch of brake cleaner in any of your planetaries and then blow it out with shop air, because that'll ruin it. I know I repeat that too a lot, but it's worth mentioning. Okay, 03 and up reaction shaft. We'll have a bearing here. Anything for high performance, regardless of year 700R4, 4L60E, retro and 03 and up reaction shaft. The 4L70Es, starting in 2007, they had a induction hardened set of splines on those reaction shafts, so good idea to retro one to any 700R4 4L60E that you are setting up for performance. All right, my apologies, the battery died, but what I was saying is that for any 700R4 4L60E, you want to install an 07 up reaction shaft or a Sonex billet steel reaction shaft in this location in place of the factory piece. And same with your Coast clutch hub here. Sonex makes a billet steel hub that you can swap in place of the factory hub. In fact, let me take this apart right quick. It's got to come apart anyway. Always replace your one-way assemblies. So sprag here in the forward position, and then your low roller clutch in the center support. So looks like the builder did do some, or may have done some sandpaper work in the inner diameter here. I'm going to do the same. I mean, it just helps refresh the surface and prepare it for the new sprag. So check this area in here. This is where, under real high torque, high RPM situations, this hub will crack right up in there. So just check that. Make sure that you're not putting yourself in that position to where you would have a failure in that location. I think this was replaced. This looks new to me. In this era, these retainers for the sprag or the supports would have been bronze in color. So this actually does look like the builder replaced it. I mean, you know, so far this looks like just largely a stock build. These bushings, I don't believe, were replaced. Cutting again to take a closer look at this 3/4 clutch hub. I mean, look how worn this is. This is actually one of the worst 3/4 hubs I've seen in a long time. So here's your 3/4 clutch pack. That's what splines onto here. And I'm actually surprised that the teeth on these frictions are not grabbing and, you know, getting stuck on the hub. What'll happen is they'll get stuck in one of these, you know, one of these grooves, and you'll have a no apply situation when you're trying to shift from 2 to 3. So see something like this, you got to replace it. This was actually reinstalled by the builder. You know, no hub's going to have this kind of wear with just a few thousand miles on it. And likewise for our reverse drum, I don't think these bushings are replaced. Check this inner diameter area too. Make sure you cannot feel ceiling ring groove wear. Every once in a while I'll see it and I'll check it, and sure enough, there is wear there and the drum will need to be replaced. This drum's going to be replaced anyway. We're not going to put it back in because we're going to run a wide band. And you do not want to run a wide 2/4 band where you have a drum that does not have a virgin surface on it. Okay, this is a replacement heat-treated shell, so good on the builder for doing that. I'm going to recommend he upgrade to a Sonex Smart Shell though. So, like I said, his truck, or it's actually his wife's truck, it's going to be making upwards of 500 to 550 horsepower. So, you know, he's going to be spending a decent amount of money on getting this thing to where it can handle that kind of power. Okay, rear sun gear. Had it and lost it. So a wide sun gear bushing from Sonex is strongly recommended. I do it on all my 700R4s, 4L60Es. No sense in not. I want to show you something. So this is going to be a knock on the builder. In other words, something that he could have done differently. Okay, notice the overlap between the snap ring and the anti-clunk spring. You never ever want to install the snap ring so that it's overlapping any part of that spring. The two ends of the snap ring should be straddling the snap ring or bracketing it. It should never overlap that anti-clunk spring, because this puts the transmission in a position to fail catastrophically if that anti-clunk spring pushes out that snap ring during the course of the center support reacting with it as you're transitioning from drive and reverse and, you know, changing range positions, especially if you're doing it you know, under kind of either performance or high speed or tactical type driving situations. So bad move there. Okay, not good. Okay, so you never want to install the snap ring like that. So let me zoom back out. We'll get that snap ring out of there, and then I'll show you a tip for removing the entire back half of the center support to the gear train to everything else without beating on the output shaft. Sorry about that. Alright, so what you want to do is take your spring pliers and situate them right up in here so that you can collapse the anti-clunk spring inward. And while you're doing that, what you're going to want to do is insert your shop air into the low reverse feed passage, and then with the clunk spring collapsed, just go ahead and force a whole boatload of air into that circuit to apply the low reverse piston. And that should push everything forward to allow you to take it out. Alright, this one was very stubborn, did not want to come out. But there it is. So, roller clutch rotation is freewheel clockwise, locks counterclockwise. So again, always replace your one-way assemblies. That said, the low roller clutch in each transmission is pretty resilient. So, if you were on like a budget and you just, you know, you couldn't afford to do every single thing that you should do, if there's one area that you could, you know, probably get away with not addressing, it's the one-way assembly and the center support. So like I said, it's pretty stout. Very rarely do they fail. Very rarely do I see one come in that's broken up. It's usually the forward sprag that goes south when it comes to the two one-way assemblies in this transmission. Okay, check this race, make sure it's mirrory smooth, make sure it's not cracked. Okay, the Sonic Smart Shell will come with its own race, so this one will not be reused if the customer elects to have that installed. So let's take a look at the low reverse clutch pack. This clutch pack is very rarely worn, or, you know, it's not often bad, and the causes for it to go bad are few and far between. And they can range from worn or hardened machine cut seals. Usually it's the inner diameter seal on the piston that goes bad, and then you'll start slipping in reverse. On an overhaul, failure to tighten down that reverse hold down plate will result in you know, massive cross leak in that apply circuit, so of course you'll burn up the low reverse clutch pack. But like I said, it's not common. I mean, loss of fluid obviously would doom the transmission entirely, but reverse input and low reverse are pretty resilient in these transmissions, all other things equal. Alright, let's see what we got. Our cushion plate or wave plate. That actually goes over here. So we got our ring gear, which seems to be hard and fast to the output shaft. I mean, one way it's a good thing, it's a snug fit, but in other respects, I gotta use a hammer to remove it. So I guess we can look at the output shaft. So, like I said, these output shafts are surprisingly stout. They can take a lot of power before you need to upgrade to the Sonic's billet shaft. And to my knowledge, Sonic's does not make an equivalent for the 700R4. So you're, you know, working with a 700 and your engine's making a lot of power, you may want to consider using a different transmission if it's making more than, like, say 700, if you can. Okay, these bearings are okay. There's the ring gear. Ring gear looks okay. Check teeth, check lugs, check the journal, check splines, check structure. I mean, you can replace the reaction element independent of the ring gear. Got the snap ring there. Otherwise, you can keep them together. It doesn't matter. I say keep them together for cleaning purposes. You don't have to take them apart. So here's your anti-clunk spring. Use a case saver in real high horsepower applications, full race, things of that nature, where there's going to be a ton of reaction going on between the center support and the case. So when it comes to 5-pinion planets, I'll be honest, it's kind of debatable as to whether or not they're actually worth doing independently of just buying a 4L65E or 4L70E core. I mean, if you have the core, then you're good, but the OEM GM planets is all I would use. I wouldn't use the aftermarket stuff. I've had issues with them before. So if you're going to run those planets independent of buying a core that has them, then I would only use the GM stuff. I would not use aftermarket. You yank out the selector seal. It's a small pry bar, takes care of it. Then we have the low reverse piston in the case. That has to come out. So you need to grab your tool to go ahead and compress the spring. I actually have to replace my tool because it's starting to get a bit long in the tooth. So let me install it and then I'll just show you. Okay, the ends of the snap ring are roughly at the 4 o'clock position from your point of view, so let's get in there, 90-degree snap ring pliers. And just pop it out. Alright, grab the tool, take it out, and then the return spring assembly usually pops up and out of position. If not, just tap it with a screwdriver and it'll come right out. It shouldn't fly out and hit you in the face, but again, you don't want to probably have your face in the case when you're doing it. There it is. And then just grab your shop air, low reverse feed, go ahead and just punch it out. So check this part number. There is a technical services bulletin out. I believe the last 3 digits of the casting number are 725 on a piston that has a history of cracking and breaking. So I'll annotate the video and put the part number on the screen if that is not correct. But the bottom line is you want to make sure that you don't put that piston back in if in fact it's installed. This number is, this particular piston is perfectly fine, and these seals are in great shape. So like I said, this transmission only has maybe 10,000 miles on it at most. And the only thing that I've seen so far that was, truly an upgrade was the billet servo, which we're going to take out now. So it looks like this bushing is new. The bushing here in the case, that was replaced. Bushing in the pump and the extension housing also look new. So these bushings were reused. This is a factory bushing. This is a factory bushing. And of course that's a factory bushing. So bushings in the gear train were not replaced. You know, again, if you're on a tight budget, 4L60E 700L4 is one of the few transmissions that you can get away with not replacing those bushings. They're usually not a concern, but like I said, I don't make those kind of moves. It's just, for me, it's high risk, no reward. All I'm doing is increasing the likelihood there's going to be a problem shortly thereafter, and that's the last thing I need. Alright, now we're going to try to pull out the servo and see if we have both a second and fourth gear assembly. I'm looking inside the case, and it looks like we have the longest servo pin that's available for these transmissions installed, and we can tell that because there's no grooves in the pin. Okay, these pins are selective, and the more grooves you have here on the end of the pin, the shorter it is. So the thing to do if you're kind of loose on band clearance and you're using the longest pin that you have available is to shim the entire assembly. So I'm curious to see if that was done at all. I mean, we know it wasn't done to the extent it should have been because we had way too much band clearance, but I'm curious to see if there's a shim installed already. Alright, this is going to be kind of a pain to get out. If I can't get it out, you know, nice and quickly on camera, then I'm just going to shut the camera off and get it out while I struggle with it so it's not so painful for you to watch. But what I'm going to try to do is tap the servo inboard a little bit, and then, in fact, I'm going to use a different screwdriver. I'm going to try to get in behind it and tap this snap ring out of its groove so that we can get the servo out. And these servos are by design much more difficult to get out than the stock servos. I mean, that's just, you know, there's a reason for that. Alright. Okay, first I want to get the opening so that it's accessible. And then I'll see if I can get at it. So once I get behind it, and that should be enough to get it started. And I'll switch to a different screwdriver because that one is grooved, and I don't want to, you know, like I said, I don't want to mar the servo up. That was a little bit more ornery than it needed to be, but we got access to it. Get up in here with this pick, and I'll grab on the O-ring and then try to pull the whole cover off. So you could still see some assembly lube here. Green assembly lube, and that's what I use too. So the that part of the servo goes in just like this, and then you collapse your lip seal. Of course, you don't want to install the servo cockeyed, but that's how it goes. Alright, so this is the Superior Technologies Super Hold servo. So that would explain why the second gear shift was calibrated the way it was, because you do not want to get too aggressive. Now this whole 1,000 horsepower thing I'm more or less throwing out the window, and I'm going to assume that this transmission was built for some sort of performance type application, where I'm going to estimate the engine was making somewhere in the neighborhood of between 350 and maybe 450 horsepower. Okay, that's based on what I'm seeing in the transmission, what was done, and how it was set up. So here's how it all comes apart. Okay, a very simple, straightforward design. You don't have the cavity for the 2-3 accumulator that you do on the factory servo, or even the Sonic Super Hold servo. So 3500 stall, we're going to probably drill the second gear feed out to 86 thousandths, maybe 93 thousandths tops, but 86 is what I'm going to probably do. If it was 2800 stall, I would do 80 thousandths or maybe even 76 thousandths. And that's with this servo installed, Sonic's boost valve and valve sleeve kit installed. That's what we're going to be running here. And otherwise, everything else being held equal. Keep all this crap here so I don't lose track of it. Just needs a wipe down. All right, so that's the teardown. Obviously, this transmission was not built to handle anywhere close to 1,000 horse. You know, it was rebuilt, looks like in 2016, like it said on the bell housing, and it looks like it was rebuilt for a mild performance application. And again, some of the products that I had mentioned earlier that I always install, particularly the hydraulics, a lot of that stuff didn't exist back then, although the Sonic's boost valves did, the Transgo shift kits did, you know, along with a host of other shift kits by other companies, you know, Superior Tech, B&M, etc., etc. So I would have expected to see something like that installed, but, you know, cursory inspection of the valve body, you know, from what we could see with it all assembled, didn't seem to indicate anything in particular was done. So, all right, I gotta figure out exactly how I want to put this thing together so that the customer gets a transmission that's going to last, and at the same time doesn't spend more money than necessary. So that's always a challenge with transmission building. You know, you want to make sure that you build it to meet the requirements without going way overboard, where customer's shelling out a whole bunch of money that he's not going to see value in return for. So, as always, guys, thanks so much for watching. Appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and leave them below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks again.